My name is Beran Bugatti. Assistant lecturer at the University of Rwanda College of Medicine and Health Sciences. I'm doing my PhD with the University of Leicester in the UK under the support of the Common Scholarship Commission. And my PhD research is in the field of e-learning and learning technologies. And I'm researching specifically opening up education with the focus on the potential contribution of massive open learning courses, open educational resources, and different stakeholders, I mean different people who are involved in higher education here in Rwanda. So in this presentation I'll talk about problem statements, and then we move to concept and conceptual framework, discuss a little bit about research methods, and phase one of the results, because my study consists of two phases. Phase one, and I'm in phase two. I discuss phase one and then move to what I'm doing in phase two. So before moving on, I want to really apologize. What he had recommended that I would talk on 20 minutes only, but I found it cannot be possible. There are key issues people need to know here, especially open licensing and open access publishing, which can save quite a lot of money on the part of the University of Rwanda academic staff and the University of Rwanda in general. So we are trying to make video of this presentation in my talk specifically, and the focus will be on my talk and this because we felt it is a good idea probably to share this presentation using different media. So it's not professional, we're using iPad, that's a resource we have access to, but I think that's a good practice to learn to use limited resources we have access to and use them to reach our objectives. So let me start with a problem statement with this tweet from the Minister of Education. He tweeted on the 30th of October last year that only 20% of students who were enrolled in higher education in Rwanda were selected for student loan and government sponsorship. So that's a little number when compared to people here in Rwanda who need access to higher education. But these tend to be not only a problem in Rwanda because there are limited resources all over the world. And when you take the issue of access, the demand of access to higher education globally, this is how the problem is. I don't know if anyone knows this gentleman. Does anyone know him? Oh, sorry, I don't know if you don't know him. His name is
John Daniel.
He was the Vice Chancellor of the Ethiopian University. He moved from there to consult with UNESCO. Then he eventually became the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Commonwealth of Learning. So he anticipated that in order to accommodate all people who need access to higher education between 2010 and 2025, there's need to build at least 3 universities every week, and each university has to be able to accommodate at least 30,000 students. Now the question I can ask all of you, are those 3 universities, have they been built? No. The answer is no. So because of the financial crisis, we all share. And if those universities are not being built, that means that more people who need access to higher education, but they cannot be accommodated within a physical universities we have. So these are different concepts we'll go through. And let me start with the first one, the concept of open education, which have been, is used in different ways depending on the kind of agendas people are promoting. I'm not going to read the definition, but I'm going to draw your attention to these 2 agendas. The first agenda is the open access agenda. The second agenda is the lifelong learning agenda. The open access agenda is more relevant in countries where access to higher education is really still very low. As access to higher education increases, then society shifts towards the lifelong learning agenda, where people are learning for professional development. Second concept is the concept of open educational resources, which are being defined as teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in the public domain and has been released under an open license to enable people to have no-cost access and reuse and redistribution without paying any fee and with no or with limited restrictions. This concept of open educational resources is also used differently depending on people's agenda. So don't get surprised when you go somewhere and people are selling materials, but they are calling them open educational resources. But that's not true. They are not open educational resources because according to this UNESCO definition, open educational resources have to be freely accessible, no cost at all, and they have to be in the public domain, and they have to have an open license. We'll see that shortly. The third concept is massive open online courses, which are defined as online, non-selective, and tuition-free courses that are addressed to a global audience of learners. And we will see how, well, probably here the way I think HEPA is implementing MOOCs. You select some students, somehow there's a selection process. But normally for people who have access to the internet, in web resource societies, anyone who goes through the courses and enroll, they don't have to pay anything. They are led for free. And massive open online courses were invented as a continuation of the open education movement and open educational resources movement. They were created in Canada. That's where we have the first MOOC, which is known as Connectivity and Connectivity Knowledge, which was taught in Canada at University of Manitoba in 2008. But MOOCs became really very popular in the year 2011 when Stanford University released its three courses, which it was teaching to its students, campus-based students, and then attracted a global audience of learners. So from that time, that's when we started having two kind of distinction of MOOCs, connectivity MOOCs, the MOOCs which have been taught from 2008, between 2008 and 2011, and then the new MOOCs, the Stanford-like MOOCs, when referred to as extension MOOCs, which means it's kind of extending university education beyond the physical university borders. So, of course, we cannot talk about MOOCs without having a quick look at different MOOC platforms. Udacity and Coursera, which are American platforms. We have Future in the UK. We have Open to Study in Australia, University in Germany, France Université Numérique in France. We have this one, which is a pan-European MOOC initiative. And this one is special. It's not a MOOC platform because courses in these, at Open Up Education are hosted at different universities which are participating in this initiative rather than being hosted in a MOOC platform. And I want to draw your attention to this because it is special. In the other MOOCs, most other MOOCs, the content is copyrighted under all rights reserved. But in the Open Up Education initiative, their commitment to have all courses copyrighted under Creative Commons license. And now you may ask yourself, how do MOOC attract? Those courses attract thousands of learners, even sometimes hundreds of thousands of learners taking the same course. How does that happen? Probably the way to understand that is, exploring this concept of non-rigorous resources, or the concept of Professor Martin Wera, which is at the Open University. He defined non-rigorous resources as resources that can be accessed and used in a way that the user does not prevent others from accessing and benefiting from them. So example of non-rigorous resources in education he gave are electronic resources. So if I have a resource, let's say a journal article which is published online, once someone goes there and downloads it, the original copy remains there. But if I have a copy of that journal article in the library, which is printed, if I go and take it, it disappears, it is no longer there. Others will not have access to it. And when we apply this concept of non-rigorous resources to other resources we need in education, let's take students' loan for instance. Students' loan can be rigorous or non-rigorous depending on the society. Let's take example in Rwanda and the UK. For instance, how many people in Rwanda apply from grade to have access to student loan. And how many of them, probably the majority, do not get it. Why? Because of very limited resources here in Rwanda. So it's highly rigorous here. But when you go to the UK, because the British government have plenty of funds for student loan, any student in the UK who writes to seek student loan, they get it. And guess what? They don't have to pay it back till their annual salary is about £25,000 per year. About 25 million for them. So if you earn less than that, you don't have to pay back the student loan. So in the UK it becomes non-rigorous, but here, because of limited resources, it is highly rigorous. And when you apply MOOCs, the rigorous concept, non-rigorous resources concept on MOOCs, when they are taken in well-resource settings, as I was saying, anyone can enroll in MOOC. What you have to invest is your commitment and effort and time and dedication to learn successfully from the course. But when it comes here in Rwanda, it becomes quite difficult to implement and they become highly rigorous. So I was reading a different article about how Kepler put their students in the first intake. They were saying 2,600 applicants submitted their application, and only 50 of them selected. And another article was saying that this year there was more than 6,700 applicants who were competing for only 150 places. So, and this is caused by different limited resources in the country. And of course, if we look at different resources needed in education for opening up education, well, if you can read it, I'm going to read them. So I find different, or I distinguish different 5 categories of resources that can be used in education. The ones are political resources, which include policy regulations that enable open learning practices. They are high drivers. We have financial resources, money, fees, students' fee or service fee, which are paid by students or funds. They are high drivers. We have technological resources, which include computers, internet, which are high drivers. In that, if we have specific bandwidth, and the users exceed the specific number that are supposed to use that bandwidth, the quality goes down. Pedagogical resources include tutorial support or teaching support, but also educational resources produced by academics. And some pedagogical resources are high drivers, others are non-drivers. For example, tutorial support are high drivers, because if you are teaching, if education is based on teaching, then there's a specific number the teacher will be able to help. If you go beyond, they will not be able to help them. But of course, in other non-driverless resources, if you are a teacher and you produce content and you make it open licensed, you share it with anyone, you give anyone permission to use it, it can be used by anyone simultaneously, even if there are billions of users simultaneously, without any of them preventing others from using it. And of course, there are heutagogical resources, which I think are resources which have been really neglected in education. So the role of the learner, investment of time, effort, and dedication and perseverance, and all those are very important for the success of learners. So sometimes, we tend to say that it happens because learners are taught, but if learners really do not invest their time, if they do not persevere, if just they want to learn within the comfort zone, I don't think they can really be successful learners. So there are many barriers that inhibit different stakeholders for in opening up education. For learners, what inhibits them for open learning, adopting open learning practices, there's the lack of technologies, of course, which is a challenge here, but also there are psychological factors. And psychological factors are defined by this professor, Andy Red from the Open University as well. Sometimes he argued that psychological factor is that feeling learners have that they are not good enough for being successful in higher education. And oftentimes, it is caused by the selective filters used in education. So, according to Professor Andy Lane, as students submit applications and the applications are not successful, the message which is passed to those students whose application have not been successful is that they are not good enough for success in higher education. That's what leads to their self-perception as not being good enough for being successful in higher education. That self-perception as not being good enough for being successful is what those two authors, Andy Lane and Van Dort, called social disempowerment. Social disempowerment can also be caused by the fact that some people feel they come from low-income families or they come from low-income countries, and sometimes they feel that if they learn with people from high-income families or countries will not be successful as those people who come from well-resourced settings. Social disempowerment can also be the result of the fact that some people may feel they don't have access to good internet connectivity, and may feel that if they learn with people who have good access to internet, that they may not be successful as they are. But that's not true, because internet connectivity is not the only resource that can be used in education for success. So success in learning does not depend on access to overabundance of resources, but more importantly, on effective use of the resources people have access to.
So people who have access to some limited resources, they may use them more effectively and perform better even than people who have access to plenty of resources, but they are not taking advantage of them. They take it for granted and they are not maximizing benefit from them.
And the other factor is the lack of recognition of open learning practice. It doesn't make any sense to people to tell them, you go and learn, but we will not recognize your accomplishments. So, for academics, there's lack of incentives, for example, salaries, and also the lack of institutional openness. If there's no policy in institution, it's quite difficult for academics to engage in open learning practices. For institutions, there's the issue of the lack of sustainability, financial constraints, and lack of policy on open education. On the part of the government, they are inhibited by the lack of evidence of financial sustainability and sometimes technological infrastructure, which is not adequate. So now, how can people contribute to making education and educational resources non-rivalrous? It's through, by publishing through open licensing. And let's first of all see the difference between traditional copyright, all right reserved, as opposed to this open license, publishing an open license. So sometimes the all right reserved publication is based on academics contributing the content for free. They give content for free to publishing companies. And at the same time, they write copyright agreements saying, so we pass you the right to have the copyright. They give away the copyright to the company. Then the company made the content their own property. They start selling that. And sometimes it's quite interesting that sometimes even academics who provided that content for free no longer have the right to use the content. And if it is a research which has been conducted in an institution, if students who participated in that research want to use the resources, they have to go back to buy it. So they participated for free, the content was given for free, then someone is monetizing it, and then they have to pay, to go back to buy it. Probably many people think if you find an electronic resources online, you can go and download it, and it's okay. Who thinks it's okay to go and download, let's say, PDF file and use it? Who thinks it's okay here? Okay.
Just to finish the question, are you asking, do you think it's okay, or do we do it?
No. I want to say, who thinks it's okay, or who are doing it?
Yeah, so I mean, I know it's not okay, but I do it.
Yeah, all right. Now, that's great. Thank you for being honest. And we do it, and I have been doing it as well for many times. I learned how sensitive it is. So, if you do it, so this is what may happen. You may end up as Diego Gomez, who is a student in Colombia, who found a very nice article on marine biology on the internet and downloaded it and shared it in his social network. What happened? An American company, probably Northern, sued the student. And the university, his university in Colombia, had, in another article, they said the university had to pay $9 million US. So you see how sensitive it is, and how really that issue can cause some hassle on the part of institutions and learners and even academics who are not aware of open licensing. So the best way, if you want to use the resources, it has to have one of these licenses to be able to be used. So these are open licenses. So in open licenses, permissions have been provided to use the electronic sources. If you don't see any of these licenses, there are 7 public domain first of all, then 6 Creative Commons licenses. They are the ones in which permission has been provided to use the resources. And for the Creative Commons license, they have been created. They have been created based on the property. The first one is attribution. So you use the resource, but you give credit to the original author. The second property is share alike. If you use the resource and create your own materials, you have also to share in the same way your material, just for the sake of continuing the open sharing chain. Or the third attribute is the non-commercial aspect. If you use it, you are not allowed to use it for, to make money out of it for commercial, or for business, for commercial purpose. And the other one is you can use it. You may have permission to use it, but not have permission to create your own material from it. So when they combine those 4 properties, the attribution, the share alike, non-commercial, non-derivative, they have 6 Creative Commons licenses. And for, I don't know if there are any academics here who publish. Anyone here? If there's no one, oh, sorry. So there are three routes for open access publishing. The first one is the green route, in which you give your article, it is copyright, it is published under all rights reserved, but the publisher gives you permission to submit an edited copy of the same article to, let's say, an institutional repository. So in that case, for you, the author, you don't pay anything, and your institution does not pay anything. But the problem with this route, the green route, is that the publisher has the right to say, you will only make your copy available, let's say, after 1 year, because they want to sell enough copy to make money. The second route is the gold route. The article is published directly in an open access journal, but what happens is that you, the author, remain the copyright holder, but you have to pay what they call article processing charges. If you don't pay as the author, your institution has to pay. And the third route is the platinum route, in which you contribute the content as the author, then other people come and see they contribute the article processing charges. And the institution does not have to pay anything. The author, you don't have to pay anything. An example of journal article that published within the platinum route is, for example, e-learning papers, which the article processing charges come from the European Commission Fund. And of course, so this is probably the last slide before moving to my slide quickly. I talked about self-determined learning, which is also referred to as Heutagogy, and I refer to Heutagogy core resources. Students will become key agents of their own educational transformation. I don't know how it happened. So you may be interested to learn more about Heutagogy, this concept of Heutagogy. There's Heutagogy community of practice, which is active on LinkedIn and Facebook, which is emerging. So my study is transformative mixed method study. It consists of two components, the research component, thorough development component. I'm going to focus only on the research component, which has two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. I conducted the study in the light of this overarching research question: how can MOOC contribute to opening up, or MOOC and OER can contribute to opening up higher education in Rwanda? And it has 4 subsidiary questions. And I conducted the study on 10 MOOCs. 9 of them on the Coursera platform, and 1 of them on the FutureLearn platform, and 5 of those MOOCs were taught by American universities, 2 by British universities, 1 by Australian universities, actually 2 by Australian universities, and 1 by German universities. And I was a participant MOOC, investigator. And I used a rubric I had developed on learning logs. If you don't know learning logs, those are very powerful tools for people who want to manage their own learning. This is a tool that is used by learners themselves who want to control their own learning. Many analytical categories emerge, but I want to present on 3. In MOOCs, they are based on video materials, text, they are peer-reviewed journal articles, books, and book chapters. And in one MOOC, the same content for students at the offering university. So MOOC students were taking the same content as students who were taking the course at the university that was providing that MOOC. When it comes to scalability, the lowest number in some MOOCs was 16,000, and highest number was over 70,000 students. And when it comes to openness, there are 2 MOOCs only that had the content that was open and licensed. That was, I'm going to tell you the full name of this MOOC. It was Learning to Teach Online, which was taught by the University of New South Wales in Australia. 90% of the content was open and licensed, and Sustainability Society and You, which was a MOOC taught by the University of Nottingham on the FutureLearn platform. 100% of the content was open and licensed. All other MOOCs, the content was under all rights reserved, which makes it difficult to adapt and use them across settings. So, in summary, this is what I found can be the contribution of those courses, because based on those features. So for those 2 which were open licensed, they can contribute to opening up access to education. They can be adapted and reused in any way, because the problem with MOOCs, they run on technologies many people here don't have access to. And if you want to open up education, you have to use the resources people have access to. Otherwise, many of them get excluded. And for indirect contribution, learning to teach online, and this one EDC because of their nature, e-learning and digital culture. Those are courses that can help people develop expertise needed for opening up education. Once people, let's say academics for instance, take those courses, they can develop those skills and use them to open up education in their respective jurisdictions. When it comes to the lifelong learning agenda, all the MOOCs, the nine MOOCs, can contribute to this agenda. That someone who is, who has job related to what the MOOC content, they can take it and prove their kind of capability, their professional capability. Exception was one MOOC which had content was only relevant to the state where it was, the university was located. It was about law, and when you talk about law, so the law for that specific state. And if they moved beyond, it was only the law that is applicable in the United States of America. So I don't want to talk about open educational resources, but when you probably should know when people promote sometimes open educational resources repository, but when you go there and investigate those repositories, you find that really almost all of the readings are not open licensed. So you have to go to buy them, for example, on Amazon. What is open license is course information, syllabus, and the list of readings. But the readings per se, which people need to learn to develop competencies, are not open licensed, and they have to be purchased. Maybe if you say that there are some limitations, there are also what people can do, different stakeholders, because those limitations can be removed by people. And of course, when you talk about MOOCs and open educational resources, even if they are open licensed resources, they need to be adapted to fit in specific settings. And there are new academic roles that are emerging, like content creation or course creation, and content aggregation and open learning assessment. And of course, on the part of learners, if you want to benefit from these open learning opportunities, you have to be a self-determined learner. You have to really invest your time, your effort, you have to persevere, you have to be dedicated. Because in the MOOCs, tutorial support is reduced. If you depend on tutors or teachers only, you cannot be successful in learning MOOCs. If you want to be successful, you have to be really a kind of self-determined learner who learns even in absence of tutorial support. And so there's also need of supporting policies, because for everything to happen, there need to be some policies that guide it. And quality needs to be ensured. So in phase 2, I'm interested in looking how different stakeholders here can remove those barriers to open education. And here's the guiding research question. And different stakeholders are learners, academics, institutional leaders, and policy makers. So thank you so much for your attention. It's open.